welcome to Berkshire Guitar Amplifier Repairs in Reading, England. Stuart Smith here, and on the bench we've got a Fender Deluxe Reverb reissue. So this is not the original, it's the reissue with the printed circuit board. And the problem with this amp is the customer says that he plugged two guitars in, one into the normal channel, one into the vibrato channel. And then he noticed, and I'm not sure how long after he noticed, but he noticed that the reverb was making a loud humming noise when he turned the reverb up. Now I can't see any link between those two things, and I think that it's just a red herring. I think for some reason he's got this hum on the reverb, it's randomly appeared, and it happened at about the same time he plugged two guitars in. So he's quite rightly putting two and two together, but I think he's making five in this particular example. So let's turn it on and see if we can duplicate the problem that he's complaining about. I have the amp powered up now, and let's just see what happens when we turn the reverb up. Oh yeah, that's a horrible hum there. So that's absolutely right what the customer says. Now the customer has done a few things. He has changed the reverb leads, the twin phonos, and the valve which feeds the reverb. So he's eliminated that. I think he said he tried a new reverb pan too. So I'm not going to mess around with this in the case here. I'm going to take the chassis out, get it up on the bench, connect a reverb pan with some new leads, and see if we still have the hum. Right, what I thought I'd do immediately is to just put in a whole new set of leads and another reverb pan to eliminate, if we can, the leads and the reverb pan. And although this pan's a bit near to the mains transformer, there's still a lot of hum on the signal. Now I have to tell you, because I don't want to extend this video unnecessarily, I've just got incredibly lucky with this amp, because I was immediately thinking some sort of strange hum loop. You know, you do have to get these leads right in terms of whether both of the inners are grounded, both of the phonos are grounded, or whether one's just a single phono. You can get yourself into trouble with hum loops. But I was just moving this pan around on the bench ready for this video, and I happened to just touch the springs. Now obviously that's making a huge racket because I'm touching them, but I also noticed the hum went away. So basically I've just got... Now what you're hearing there is the reverb oscillating, which is a known fault with these amps, and there's a cure for it, which I will do as a modification. Ignore that because that's nothing to do with what we're talking about. I'm just going to put this tea towel on there to damp the springs down, and now there's a very slight hum there. But nothing like as much as when I remove the tea towel. And you can hear that's a lot louder. So basically what's happening is the hum is being transmitted down the spring, which did surprise me really. That sounds like quite a nice pure hum. But basically we have hum coming in on the send. So the reverb tube and the reverb transformer are sending hum in here, and that's of course is being coming down the spring, being picked up by the return, and then getting amplified on the return to produce this quite nasty hum. I don't know whether I can do that again without it oscillating. Let's see. There we go. Hardly anything, look, and I'll take off the duster, and there's that hum. So what that tells us is it's nothing to do with hum loops or the lead or the reverb pan or hum loops or anything. We're actually getting hum being sent down to the reverb pan. So let's just have a look at the reverb send circuit on this to see if we can see where that hum might be coming from. By the way, I've changed the valve. I think it's this one, I can't remember now. I've changed the reverb send, I think it's this one actually. Changed the reverb valve. There's the reverb transformer, and of course no change. So let's have a look at the schematic to remind ourselves what's going on here. Okay, we're on to something here, I think, so just follow me through on this. Here is how the reverb send is done. Signal comes in here, and they use both halves of the ECC83, actually ECC81, to drive the reverb transformer. That just doubles up on the power basically, because they take a bit of driving, these transformers. So that's what they've done there. This wiggles up and down, this wiggles up and down, and this is connected to the reverb spring. So this wiggles up and down and sends the signal to the reverb. However, look at this. Here is effectively the HT for this valve. They're calling it Z. It comes in here. It's going to be a few hundred volts. Comes in here, goes through the transformer, and as you'd expect, to the anodes of the valve here. So that's the equivalent of having a resistor from here up to HT. However, what is this plus Z here? Where is that being derived from? Because if there's hum on this HT here, then of course this is all going to be hummy, and the hum is going to get sent down the line. Now, I had initially rejected that as an idea because I thought, well, there's no other hum on the amplifier. If we turn the reverb control down, you don't get any hum. The signal's nice and clean. There's no hum. So if the HT had a fault, supposing one of the caps was open circuit or something, you'd hear hum all over the amplifier, not just on the reverb. So I did a bit more detective work, and look what I found. Here is the power supply effectively for the amp. So here's the rectifier valve look, and here's our HT. And it goes through a choke, and then as standard as a smoothing capacitor, a resistor, a smoothing capacitor, a resistor, a smoothing capacitor, and this produces the various HTs for the preamps and the power amps. However, look what's very first in the chain here, Z. So the very first HT that is created here, and by the way the highest voltage, which is interesting, is the reverb tank HT, and it has this smoothing capacitor here. So if that smoothing capacitor was faulty, open circuit or whatever, leaky, then we'd have hum here on the HT. That of course would cause hum on our plus Z, which would of course cause hum on our reverb. But later on down the chain, let's say it is quite hummy here, we've got a nice resistor and another capacitor here. This is going to have no hum. Another resistor, another capacitor. This is going to have no hum. So the rest of the amplifier will be nicely smooth, thank you very much. Only this plus Z here will have the hum. So I'm putting my money on this capacitor here. So what we're going to do now is take the dog kennel off and have a look at the HT caps. I haven't done that yet, and see what kind of condition they are in. And here we are inside the dog kennel, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 HT caps. I don't know which one is the plus Z, not marked. Oh, C33, 34, 35. Maybe we can tell. Oh yes, we can, look. So that's the C33 we're after, which is that one there. So that is the one that's smoothing the plus Z. So let's immediately have a look, see if we can see anything going on there. And I don't know about you, but I can't see any leakage there at all. Not much point looking on this side. You very rarely get any leakage on this side. So it may be that I'm wrong here, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it on, get that hum back, and I'm going to dab another HT cap across there and see if the hum goes away. And if it does, that capacitor is faulty and we've solved the problem. However, let me just mention a couple of things. This amplifier has the IC capacitors, and they are terrible, cheap capacitors that Fender use. They're always going wrong. They go wrong in the Blues DeVille, Blues Deluxe. All those amplifiers use exactly the same cheap IC capacitors, and they go faulty. So I wouldn't at all be surprised to see if one of those hadn't gone down. And then if it has, I need to find out whether the customer wants to change them all, and I would recommend changing them all on this amp. Anyway, let's prove our point by sticking a capacitor across there and see if the hum goes. Now, for this exercise, I'm going to use my little homemade test kit here. This has a 100 microfarad 450 volts literally across these two terminals here. So if I dab those on there, we'll immediately charge up the capacitor inside here. And I can also discharge it with this button afterwards, and there's a discharge resistor inside which would eventually discharge the cap in here. So what I'm going to do is basically a capacitor on the end of these two pieces of cable here. So we will connect, let's go straight onto our suspect cap. I don't know if you can hear that humming in the background. I can very clearly. Be a bit of a spark as we charge the cap up. Instant removal of the hum. There's the hum. Instantly solved. So that's great news, because that does want to oscillate, that reverb. Right, now I'm going to just discharge this. It's a little bit dangerous, this, but see, that's a bit of a spark there. This does eventually discharge through here, so it's not a question if I pick this up in 5 minutes I'll get a shock. It takes about 30 seconds to discharge, but I just need to be mindful of the fact there is voltage on there. Great. I now want to call the customer and say, give him the good news and tell him that we found this very peculiar hum problem, and we want to change that capacitor. Does he want to change them all? Okay, so I've got some new capacitors here. These are F and T capacitors, which I like very much. If I can possibly use F and T in an amp, I will. Now let me show you something interesting. I don't know how significant it is, but I think it is interesting. So 22 microfarads, 500 volts. 22 microfarads. Not sure why that isn't focusing on there. Anyway, that is 22 microfarads, 500 volts, which is the same as that capacitor there. That's 22 microfarads, 500 volts. Look at the size difference. So this is a good 10% bigger, this capacitor. 47 microfarads at 500 volts, 47 microfarads, 500 volts. So they're exactly the same capacitor. Look at the size difference. This is again 10 or 20% bigger. And I'm hoping I can get these in here. I'm pretty sure I can. But what's the implication of that? The implication of that is that these are cheap capacitors. This is how big a capacitor needs to be properly 47 microfarads and 500 volts, to get the spacing between the layers to stop the capacitor breaking down under high voltage. These capacitors just about work for a while and then they go wrong. Now we have 3 at 22 microfarads, 500 volts, there we go, and at 47, and this one is 220 microfarads at 100 volts. That is almost certainly the bias smoothing capacitor. So we'll change that as well, why not? Even though that's probably okay. It's probably only got about 50 volts across it. So that's probably alright, that one. And before I do anything, I'm just quickly going to check that these capacitors are discharged. I'm fairly happy that they are, because the amplifier was on when I turned it off, and yeah, nothing on any of these. And we're unplugged from the mains, so we're not going to have any nasty surprises. That's good. So let's make a start on changing these. Obviously I won't film the whole thing, so it's not particularly too difficult to do this. If one of those has gone, the others are going to be on their way out. That's interesting, isn't it? Don't you think? Again, that the one with the most voltage on it, which is this first stage capacitor, I don't know what the voltage is, maybe 400 volts, that's the one that's gone. And the ones with the lower voltages, as we drop down through this resistor chain, are okay. So it's to do with the working voltage of the capacitor. It's supposed to be 500 volts, yet they're falling over at 400 volts after a few years. Do Fender know this when they design these amps, or do they just say these amps are 0.0001 of a cent cheaper, let's buy them? I don't know. I just don't know. These amps, these caps are definitely cheaper than a decent F&T. So I'll just quickly show you one, because I know some people, you know, who are beginners want to see precisely how we do something. Not particularly easy this, because the way these cables are glued in here. So basically I'm just using some desolder braid on here, and that wicks up the solder, and allows me to just remove that capacitor like so. Just remove that one. So I'm just literally going to repeat that process all the way down. A little bit awkward due to these, look, can't really turn this board upside down very easily, but I'll manage. Once I got all those out, we can pop the new ones in, a bit of hot melt glue between them, and we're good to go. A little bit awkward to get these out here, they're very well glued down with some gunk. I'm just using a bit of force here to get them off. Right, now we've got those off there, it's going to be easy for me just to put an iron on the other side here. And just give the capacitor a pull. There we go, coming off quite easily. Right, so there's the capacitors out. I'm going to chuck them all. I can't remember which one's the faulty one, doesn't matter, they're all going in the bin. And I'm now just going to clean up these holes with a bit of desolder braid to make it easy for me to put the new capacitors in. So quite simple really, just go on with some braid there, and that cleans up the hole quite nicely. Golly, there's a lot of solder on this particular joint. Golly, that really doesn't want to clear, that one. There we go. This one. Some people like solder suckers. I used to use solder suckers. I've become a fan of the braid, funnily enough. Kind of old school desolder braid, but used to use it back in the 70s. But desoldering tools are all very well. You've got to fire them up and get them to the right temperature and stuff. By the time you've tarted around, you can just put on a little bit of braid and it's done. It also slightly protects the printed circuit board, the braid. It doesn't put so much heat into the joint, into the yeah, you know, it doesn't put so much heat onto the board. It kind of wicks away some of the heat as well as the that. Right, so all those are now clear. Now then, do I bother to try and take any of this stuff off? No, I don't think I need to really bother. So let's just put the first capacitor in and see how we get on. So we want to about there. And about here. We can trim off some of this excess lead at this point. All this go in. Alright, there we go. So we'll just use this. I don't use lead-free solder. Can't stand the stuff. I've got a secret stash of about 20 reels of leaded solder which is going to see me out. I got it at a car boot sale. Someone was getting rid of it, so I said, right, I'll have that. So that's that one, and now we'll put these in. Yeah, there's plenty of room for these, that's good. Thought it might be a bit tight, but it isn't. When you put a capacitor in, always put the legend uppermost so that someone in the future can see what you've done without having to guess what the capacitor value is. And there we go, there are the 5 capacitors in. I'm just going to put a little bit of hot melt glue along the edges of each one just to hold them in, and then they're going to put the dog kennel back on, and we'll power it up and see if it works. Just double checking that all of the positives are downwards, which they are. Very easy to make a mistake, which results in a large bang when you turn on the supply. There we go, a bit of hot melt glue on there. Some people prefer silicone sealant, which I suspect is slightly better, but it's more inconvenient to use. I just find it's easier to use a hot glue gun on that, and that'll be perfectly adequate. So I'll pop the dog kennel back on and we'll power it up. Okay, the amp is powered up, and there's a little bit of residual hum there, but I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. Don't forget we've got all this out on the bench here, so I'm fairly confident now that that's cured, and if we pop this back in we will have sorted the problem. So I think I feel confident about putting the chassis back in. Right, it's not a modification I've done before, but apparently if you put a 2N2 2.2 nanofarad capacitor, 2200 picofarads, across R28, this stops the reverb, oscillation and noise. So I'm going to put that across there and just make sure the reverb still works. Right, that's the mod done. Let's turn the amp back on. And I haven't done this mod before, as I say, so okay, yeah, it's still a bit hummy, but I don't know whether that's... oh yeah, it's just the reverb pan. So that's supposed to cure that oscillation problem on the reverb. Reverb's up full at the moment, so doesn't seem to be oscillating, so I think we'll just leave that. Right, I think I'll put the chassis back in the case and make sure it still works okay. So there we go, the amp is back together now and it's pretty quiet. Reverb is on halfway. And even on full, there isn't that horrible hum that there was there before. So that's a good fix, that. Very pleased about that one. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that one. I did. That was a nice straightforward fix, but I got a little bit lucky because I had in my mind that that was going to be some sort of complex hum loop. I never for a moment thought that the hum was being actually sent down the spring and being picked up on the other side of the spring. It's a nice clean hum, that. I would expect it to be a bit more springy, but anyway, I was very lucky that I just happened to touch the spring and the hum just went away immediately, so I thought, interesting. So that's a first for me. I haven't come across that fault before, and I think it was interesting, wasn't it, that the Z supply for the valve that feeds the reverb spring was the very first supply in the chain, and that was the one that had the hum on, and that hum was masked by the rest of the smoothing going down the chain for the other stages of the amp. Anyway, we've done a good upgrade on this amp because those IC capacitors are complete rubbish, and it's now got a decent set of F&T in them, and I think this amp will be good to go for a few years yet. quite a nice amp actually, despite the fact that it's a PCB. Right, so thanks as always for watching. I'll see you on the next video.